Polestar is a relative newcomer when it comes to car makers, but it's been around for a while as Volvo's performance and racing division before becoming its electric sub-brand. As with its Volvo relatives, it's designed in Sweden and it's owned by Chinese manufacturer Geely. This is the third vehicle from Polestar, and thankfully, they make their naming convention as easy as it gets in all of automotive. This is simply the Polestar 3. Before we get into this in-depth review, do us a favor, hit those like and subscribe buttons below to get all of our latest content. This is the first SUV from the company, and after the Polestar 1, they started to get away from the Volvo design language and have developed their own personality since. Now up front we have these converging lines that kind of come together in this folded origami-like thing. It sort of reminds me of some of the newer Kias, and that's kind of a good thing. One part that kind of intrigues me is this front wing that is really unique in styling. It gives it a sportier look, but probably also helps out with aerodynamics, which is critical when you're on the highway. As with most EVs, there's really not much of a grille, so it's all blocked off here, which gives it that kind of smoothed over futuristic look. From the profile view, the Polestar 3 kind of blends the best of SUV and hatchback styling. It's, to me, just kind of a big sporty hatchback. And that starts off with these squared off fender flares that sort of set off the stance and kind of give it that kind of hunkered down athletic feel. There's also sort of a weird little accent down here where it shows off some of the specs of the car. To me, that's sort of a throwback to some of the 90s design, and I gotta say, I don't hate it. There's another call out in the front grille for the safety sensors too. So there's one thing that might be missing that you'll see in other Polestar 3s, and that's a little hump just above the mirror on the roof, and that's a LiDAR sensor and emitter. That's forward compatible with what Polestar hopes will be a fully autonomous drive system. In my experience, it's usually better to wait until that technology is proven and working, rather than possibly paying for a feature that may not ever come to fruition. See Tesla. For the most part, owners are going to be using their smartphone as their key, and that's a standard feature. However, for some reason, it's not really working with my phone, but they do offer this little key fob here, which should actually work as your regular key fob so you don't have to unlock everything. But unfortunately, that's not working either. So it's a good opportunity to see what happens when everything else goes wrong and you have to use the key. And it's not ideal because you have to sort of hold it on that spot for a second or two for it to unlock. And then when you need to start it up, you also have to put it in the center console. So yeah, it's much better if you can pair your phone as the digital key. Around back, the sporty and futuristic theme continues with this wide horizontal light bar that really makes it stand out at night. And you also have this really nice sharp spoiler up top to give it a little more of an angular, aggressive, sporty feel. Right down on the sides, these might look like air outlets, but they're really just aerodynamic devices to help the air kind of curve around rather than flutter. Overall, I really like the way this car looks, but let us know in the comments what you think. All Polestar 3s come with a 111 kilowatt-hour battery that's mounted in the trunk. They're also capable of DC fast charging up to 250 kilowatts, which should get you from 10% to 80% in about 30 minutes. The base model is a long-range single motor that has 299 horsepower and 361 pound-feet of torque. The EPA estimates you'll get 350 miles out of a single charge. Next up is a long-range dual motor, which has 489 horsepower and 620 pound-feet of torque, which is rated at 315 miles of range. Now this one is a long-range dual motor performance, which has 517 horsepower and 671 pound-feet of torque. Now, the performance model adds summer tires, a sharper chassis with a more sporty suspension, and upgraded brakes. How does this all come together on the road? Let's find out. Now, I contend that the base model and the mid-range dual motor are going to be plenty for most drivers. Acceleration is immediate, as you'd expect with any EV. It's just really decisive in the way it gathers speed. But here's the thing. I'm not even in performance mode yet. To unleash everything, I just hit this performance button down here and it gets up with a little more spirit for sure. But as far as comfort goes, the ride is pretty firm, and we're being bounced around quite a bit here, and this is in the softest suspension setting. When you go to the sport or the really firm setting, yeah, it gets pretty harsh. But again, the ride quality is enjoyable for the most part. You'll feel every bump, but they're not going to be intrusive or harsh. I do hear a little bit of that low frequency rumble that you get with some EVs, but it's not as bad as, let's say, some other or older EVs. When you do hit a bump in the road, you hear a little bit of a thud, but again, it's not overpowering. Handling is excellent though. This is one of the more fun SUVs to drive. And when you consider that it's also got some utility, well, it kind of is a Swiss Army knife where you can do everything with it. Safety is always a concern, and with its Volvo lineage, it comes packed with everything you'd expect, including adaptive cruise control. Now you can also select one pedal driving with this, and you have 3 different levels: off, mid, and normal. And the normal has a really good mix of deceleration when you lift your foot off, but it's not like it's just slamming on the brakes. You can let it off, but you don't have to be so careful with it. This also comes with the pilot assist option, which adds a automated driving system that combines adaptive cruise control with lane keep assist. In addition, you get a surround view camera and a head-up display. Now, I do like that you can choose a bunch of different modes for braking and suspension and acceleration, but unfortunately, again, they're deep in a menu and it's not the easiest to get to. So yeah, this is one of those instances where I'd like just a sport button or a drive mode button. Just because it has performance in its name, I'd expect it to be a little easier to access those features. So that kind of wraps it up behind the wheel. I have a lot more to talk about with the interior, so let's pull over. If there's one thing I've always loved about Polestar and Volvo, it's their unique Scandinavian design. This interior just feels welcoming. Maybe not warm because of the color palette, but these materials that they chose are just really nice to the touch, and they look great too. That's all accented by some high-tech elements, like the standard 14.5-inch infotainment touchscreen. This touchscreen does run off of Google built-in, so it might be a little bit of a complication if you're an Apple user, which is just over half the population. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are wireless, but for some reason, I haven't been able to use Apple CarPlay with this system. Now, one problem I have with this system is everything has to go through this touchscreen. If you want to adjust the seats, you've got to go through a couple menus here and then adjust it using the steering wheel buttons here. It's not all that great, but honestly, if you're the owner and you're the only one driving it, you only really have to do it one time. And even some of the primary controls, like opening the trunk or even the glove box, you have to go through the menus to find it. And even then, it's really not all that great to use because its buttons are a little small on the screen and it's not that easy to read either. So yeah, there are some usability issues that I find myself personally, but your results may differ. Now, when things do get a little too complicated and you can't find a menu, there is a good voice activation feature. You just hit the button here and say, "Hey Google, adjust temperature to 70 degrees.
Got it, changing the temperature to 70 degrees.
Now, thankfully, they do include a wireless charging pad as standard, and it's also supposed to charge that little key fob. One thing I also like about it, it's ventilated, so keep your phone nice and cool while it's charging. As far as storage goes, it's pretty good. You have these moderately sized cup holders and a pretty deep center armrest bin, but you also have this big tray down here. You have 2 USB-C ports, as long as a little flap that'll hold a device in pretty securely. And overall, comfort is also really good. These seats kind of hold me in nicely, and they have good lateral supports for when you're cornering. Also built in is a massage function. And yes, I really do like massage functions, especially on longer road trips. They really tend to reduce some of the overall fatigue you'll feel at the end of a trip. There are a bunch of nitpicks, as I've already gone over, but there's one that's really kind of sticking out, and I see it every time I'm sitting here, and it's this instrument panel here. It might just be an optical illusion, but it looks like it's slightly tilted clockwise by like a few degrees or something. It just kind of messes with that obsessive compulsive part of my design brain, but I think that over time, I'll probably get used to it. Another thing I'm not too crazy about are these multi-function pads on the steering wheel. Now, this one here is always for the voice command, and the one below, it sort of helps select things. But without any labeling on them, or at least telling you what each one does without looking at the instrument panel, it's a little clunky as far as how it's used. Another thing that kind of irks me is the lack of audio controls on the steering wheel. Now, you can't really adjust the volume or skip forward, but thankfully there is a volume knob right here within easy reach, and you can also skip back and forth. Now, so far, none of these are real deal breakers. They're not going to say, I won't buy because of that. But there is one that might be, and it could be for me and might be for you as well. And it's this panoramic sunroof. It is huge and it is beautiful, and it makes the interior feel airy and open. But here's the problem. There's no shade and there's no tinting. There's no little button to kind of make it go opaque or go dark. There's no rolling shade. There's nothing. There is sort of a janky stick-on thing that you can get, but honestly, that kind of feels like a solution that Tesla would come up with. Not very well thought out and sort of an afterthought. So yeah, on a hot day, it is solar reflective, but even just driving around yesterday, it started kind of burning the top of my head a little bit. So that's just something to keep in mind. As you can see back here, I have a ton of space. Look at the legroom. I can really stretch my legs out, and there's plenty of space for my feet underneath the front seats too. Now, this front seat is set for me, and I'm 5'10", and I have plenty of headroom too. And that's surprising when you consider the shape of this car. It's kind of a sleek hatchback. So I expected to be a little more closed in back here, but it's surprisingly open. And of course, this panoramic sunroof helps. Here in the center console, we have our own climate controls and heated seats, as well as 2 USB-C ports for charging. Materials quality back here is equivalent to the front, which is really nice. And it just kind of exudes that whole Scandinavian luxury that I find so attractive. Here in the back, we have 17.1 cubic feet of cargo space if you load it to the top of the seat backs. If you load it to the top of the roof, it's 21.1. Well, that's not that much when you consider that this sloping rear roof line kind of cuts into the overall bulk that you can throw in there. But it is a very usable space, and they brought the best from Volvo. It's this multi-panel kind of divider. Now, we have these hooks that appear so you can just hang your shopping bags off of, a really deep bin underneath. So yeah, it gives you a lot more versatility. And to help matters, since they all come with the adaptive air suspension, you can raise and lower the height of the trunk back here. So if you have something really big and bulky, it makes it just a little bit easier to get it back there. There aren't any powered seat back releases, but the latches aren't that far forward, and they also flip the rear headrests at the same time. So overall, it's a pretty usable space for something that's this small. Like most EVs, this also has a front trunk, or frunk, but it's only 1.1 cubic feet, so it's only good enough for maybe the charge cable and a few water bottles. Overall, I really like this Polestar 3. I think it drives great, and I think it looks great too. But there are some of those weird idiosyncrasies that I'm just not that fond of. Unlike previous Polestars, this is made in South Carolina, not China. That said, it's still not eligible for those desirable tax credits. But if you lease it, there might be a workaround. But move quickly if you're thinking about it, because that's an ever-changing thing right now. As far as price goes, the base long-range single motor starts just under $70,000. Step up to the long-range dual motor, and you're talking just under $75,000. The performance model starts just over $80,000. And with all of the options and first edition that we have here, this, as tested, is $93,000. Ouch! But let's put that into context with other luxury electric SUVs. It is less expensive, and I'd say a little more sporty to drive than the BMW iX. It's definitely sportier to drive than the Mercedes EQE, but the EQE is way more luxurious and expensive, as you'd expect. So on the whole, I can definitely recommend this as a great EV choice. It does everything you want it to do, plus you get that little added boost of performance. But what do you think? Would you go for the Polestar 3 or maybe look into its rivals? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and we'll see you in the next review.